Hello everyone! Happy New Year! I am back! Welcome! It has been a while. It's been so long I've almost forgotten how to do this. Don't know what to do with my hands. Sun and Mood Read. I hope you've been well. I am very happy to be back. I've had a very long break, 5 weeks. It's the busy season, and these holidays were the first time in a very long time that my family was able to spend time with extended families. So we made the most of it, and it's been fabulous, but now I am just burnt out with love, food, drinks, and I am ready to get back to a bit of normality and just get 2021 rolling. Today, I would like to share with you what I have read so far in my summer reads. If you'd like to have a look at my Summer in OZ TBR, I will share the link below. There were many books because I wanted a vast array of options. But of course, being me, I added a few, took away a few, changed my mind so many times depending on my mood. But that's summer reading for me. Also, my reading has been slow, very slow. My brain has slowed down a lot. So I gravitated towards comfort reads, books that just catered to my mental slothness, basically. So I guess it was a little bit predictable of me to end up spending most of my time in the Regency period. For some reason, I connect books within the Regency Victorian era with comfort reading. I don't know why. Bronte, Austen, and now I have been introduced to Georgette and even a little bit of a historical romance, which I will get into today. So for the most part of December, I was stuck in a Regency wormhole, and I did not mind at all. So let's take a look at what I have read so far in summer. So before I talk about my Regency wormhole reads, I'll just get one book out of the way which didn't really fit into that Regency theme, but was a reflective comfort read for me. It was absolutely fabulous, and it was The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is one I've been meaning to read for a very long time. Now, the story, if you don't know it, is set in the 50s and follows Stevens, who is a long-serving butler at the prestigious manor Darlington Hall in Oxford, England. He decides to take a road trip all around England, and during this trip he reflects, reminisces about his life and his service to Darlington Hall, and reminisces about particular events that happened during the 20s and 30s, so during the war. I knew I was going to love this book, and I absolutely did, but I was also pleasantly surprised with how humorous and slightly left center it was. This was written in the first narrative. Stevens narrates his reflections, and this was done so well. Straight away, you had a very clear idea of what Stevens' personality, values, perceptions were through his polite, understated, slightly detached way of narrating. Through his narrative and the events he describes, themes of, regret and, the fine line between dignity, pride, and how that can hinder or stunt your growth as a human being. Those themes were effectively explored by Ishiguro. So it was absolutely marvelous. And now I can finally watch the film. I don't like watching film adaptations of books if I haven't read them. So yeah, I'm excited to watch the film, also because I worship the ground Emma Thompson walks on. Okay, now let's move on to my Regency wormhole reads, starting with Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Now, I'm cheating a little bit. I actually read this in the last 3 days of November, but I haven't had a chance to talk about this book, so I'm doing it today. Northanger Abbey was the last of the mainstream Austen books that I hadn't read. I don't really have a clear reason why I hadn't read it. Maybe because it was Austen's first work and I've heard mixed things in the past, but I decided to read it because Sam from Cozy Afternoons, and I will share her link below, she tagged me in her Autumn Vibes booktuber tag video, and she mentioned me and Northanger Abbey as hang on, I've got to read it. Well, it was as both classic and regal booktuber or book with a quirky flair. So I was quite honoured and quite shocked to be referred to as regal. And I also thought it was quite funny that of all the Austen books that she could mention, she mentioned the one that I haven't read yet. So that gave me a good incentive to read it. In the past, I have picked it up and tried to read the beginning and couldn't grasp the tone of it. I just didn't get it. But two things happened this time round that made me really enjoy this book. The first was I just started researching and watching some reviews about Northanger Abbey and realised that this book is a parody, and perhaps not just the gothic tones, but I think it has a lot of commentary and a lot of wink parodic elements just about the Regency society in general. The protagonist is quite young and naive. In fact, a lot of the characters are in this story. It almost came across to me like a Gossip Girl / Mean Girls kind of vibe. And so once I was able to switch my lens and read it as a parody, as a story with a lot of, sarcasm, I found the book absolutely hilarious. It was so funny and so witty. The other thing that happened was I listened to Juliette Stevenson's narration of the audiobook. And if you get a chance to listen to Juliette's narration, please do, because she was absolutely brilliant. She nailed the tone, the humor, the sarcasm. Her interpretation of the protagonist was quite hilarious, endearing, but a little bit airhead-ish. Yeah, she just nailed it and helped me to understand the parodic elements of this story and what Austen's intention was. There were definitely a couple of plot structures that I just kind of cocked my head to, but hey, this was Austen's first work, so surely she can be forgiven, particularly for the fact that she improved immensely. That sounds very condescending, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so Northanger Abbey, once I realised it was a parody, listening to the audiobook, it was a brilliant read. Loved it. So after Northanger Abbey, once December hit, I tried to read a couple of heavier books and realised I just was not ready for that. I just wanted to stay in my Regency period, and my library holds of Georgette books still hadn't come in. So I was thinking, okay, what should I read? I thought about it and I realised, you know what, I think my brain needs to be fed like a book equivalent to a dirty burger. So I needed a little bit of junk, but I still wanted to stay within kind of like the Regency period. So I thought this is a good time than ever to try a bit of Julia Quinn, the Bridgerton series, and yes, mainly because the Netflix adaptation was coming out. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to give this a go. I feel like a bit of historical romance, a bit of raunchiness, nothing too heavy. So I gave the first two books of the Bridgerton series a go, and yeah, it hit the spot. Look, it's not trying to be anything more than a historical romance novel. I can see why Julia Quinn is the queen of this genre, and she is a clever chicken with this Bridgerton series because you are gradually introduced to the 8 Bridgerton siblings in a really interesting way. They've all been named in alphabetical order. So you've got Anthony, then Benedict, then Colin, then Daphne, then Eloise, then F, G, and H. Each book focuses on one of the siblings and their journey to love. So the first book, The Duke and I, centers around Daphne and her meeting the Duke, Simon, and their growing relationship. The premise is, for a variety of reasons, Daphne and Simon decide to pretend that they are courting each other. But you have many other subplots and you are gradually introduced to the other siblings, so you can't help getting a little bit invested in the family. So you finish the first book and then you read that the second book is about, it's about Anthony, the eldest, and I want to know what happens there. And then you obviously finish the second book and then you move on to third and you realize it's about, whoever is next down the alphabetical line. So yeah, Julia Quinn, she gets you hook, line, and sinker. Well played. I highly, highly enjoyed Duke and I. steamy, raunchy, romantic, just enough of an arc within the characters and the backstory to get me a little bit invested. Yeah, not historically, detailed in any way, but that's not what I was looking for. To be absolutely honest, I have never read a book within the Regency period that was steamy historical romance. So it felt quite naughty to be reading this, to read of such exposure of members of this Regency society that was so familiar and previously demure to me. Yeah, it felt naughty and I liked it. Yeah, so loved Duke and I, and then I moved on to the second book, The Viscount Who Loved Me, and this centered around Anthony, the eldest. I loved this one. I actually loved this one more than the first book, Duke and I. I dug the whole hate to love trope. It was interesting arc for both characters and also just the emotional struggles of Anthony I appreciated. I just believed the chemistry and their relationship a little bit more than Daphne and Simon. So yeah, I highly enjoyed that one and I was on a roll, so I thought, well, I'll move on to the third book. Tried to move on to the third book, which was called An Offer from a Gentleman. This centered around Benedict, who I wasn't really interested in, and I started reading and I realized it was a Cinderella kind of trope, and that kind of made me gag a bit. So I stopped and said to myself, that'll do, pig, that'll do. Well, with the books anyway, because then I moved on to watching the Netflix adaptation, Bridgerton, and oh my god. Yes, I am on the Bridgerton bandwagon, or the curricle, I should say. God damn it, it was so good. So good. And I'll just spend a few minutes gushing about it. So it's mainly based on the first book, Duke and I, centering around Daphne and Simon. But there was some wonderful subplots happening with lots of different characters, not just the siblings. One of the reasons I loved this adaptation was when I was reading the book, there were times when, well, look, I'm not going to criticize a historical romance novel for being a historical romance novel. It is what it is, but even within that genre and accepting it and going, yep, I'm all for it. There were many occasions in the book that I was reading it and I was like, oh, it's just a little bit too corny. I just feel like this Netflix adaptation kind of erased those moments and erased that tone somehow. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that there was definitely a heightened element and interpretation that the director and cinematographer chose for this adaptation, and it really worked for this society. I fell head over heels in love with Daphne and Simon, which I didn't do in the book. But not just Daphne and Simon, all the characters were very well realised. I really enjoyed their journeys. And all such brilliant actors as well. And, yes, the cinematography was just so dazzling and beautiful. And the music, I love those kind of string quartet versions of, current pop songs. Very clever. Raunchy where it needed to be raunchy. And oh my God, was it raunchy? I loved it. So yeah, I am on the Bridgerton curricle and excited about season 2 because hopefully, fingers crossed, it's about Anthony. The other main reason I loved this adaptation was the diverse casting. This comes with a but. So if you have seen it or seen the trailers or even the posters, you will have noticed that this Regency society depicts people of all races, skin colors in this period, which obviously was not the case historically. So this Netflix adaptation attempts to play on the true historical speculation of Queen Charlotte, King George's wife, having black ancestry. The show asks and presents the notion of, well, what if King George's marriage to a queen of black heritage caused a kind of lifting of racial oppression and everyone, no matter what race, skin, colour, was equal in the late 1800s in England. So they kind of play on that alternate society. So this kind of explanation of why there was diverse casting, I didn't like it because I feel like if they were going to go down that road, it needed to be fleshed out. in detail, not just mentioned on a whim in a scene or two. But on the other hand, if it had been fleshed out, it wouldn't have been Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series. Therefore, in my opinion, this explanation for the diverse casting was not necessary at all. And this aspect is actually one of my pet hates when it comes to shows. And this is coming from not just a viewer, but from my professional experience as an actor, having been cast in a variety of things, stereotyped and not. It's almost like they is different depending on, the production, casting directors, producers, people who are investing, etc. They underestimate the general viewers. It's almost like they think people's brains will explode in either confusion or anger because there are Black, Hispanic, Asian, non-Caucasian actors playing characters who are historically white or within an Anglo-European society. But surely something like Hamilton has proved that no, people's brains do not explode and freak out. No, the world does not end if you don't explain why there is a Black person walking around in a waistcoat in high society. Because I believe for most decent-minded people, sure, you may notice that slight aesthetic change, perhaps in the first 2 seconds to 5 minutes when you're watching something. But you know what? The most unbelievable phenomenon occurs with human viewers, and that is they just start to follow the story. Look, I'm sounding very angry, but I'm really not. I appreciate and loved the diverse casting, and it's all very progressive and where it should be heading, which is forward. I just personally don't think it was necessary to put in some kind of clever explanation as to why there are Black people walking around in this Regency period story. Or if they felt necessary, then yeah, do a spin-off. Queen Charlotte, the TV series, I would watch that. The actress who played Queen Charlotte, she's brilliant. Do that. Okay, rant over. Besides that little aspect, I did love it. I loved Bridgerton. Just a complete indulgent and life/love affirming series. Okay, so after this Bridgerton binge, my library holds for Georgette Heyer's Arabella and Frederica came through. And thank goodness, because I was a little bit hungover from my soft smut disguised as historical novel phase. Please don't be offended, Julia Quinn fans. I say that as a compliment. I love soft smut. This was quite highly anticipated. I've been meaning to read Georgette Heyer for a while. Was a little bit hesitant, I think, because I've tried to read like retells of Jane Austen and I didn't like it. Not that Georgette Heyer is a retell of Jane Austen, but she writes within the Regency period. She is a prolific historical novelist who wrote in the Regency period and other periods and in different genres as well. She is exquisitely detailed in the historical elements of whatever period she is writing in. So I knew all those things going into reading Arabella, which is the one I read first. She's just so well researched within that Regency period, and you can just tell that she just breathed London society in her life as well. Her descriptions of the fashion, culture, architecture, just local London landmarks, just everyday life. Her exposition of this Regency life almost gave me a more enhanced insight when I think about the Jane Austen novels. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Alternating reading Heyer and Austen may actually enhance and increase my, love for the Jane Austen novels, if that's even possible. So yeah, I read Arabella first. And I guess if I try to summarize the plot, it does sound very, that typical Regency society life trope. Young lady being introduced to society, attending the ton, the back and forth ride of conversations and circumstances with the romantic interest, Mr. Beaumaris. And within that, you have, subplots and characters who surround the central plot, which brings to life that society. So it has all that. And I really, really enjoyed it. I did love it. And I can just tell that Haya is going to be a true delightful comfort read for me. I am about 60% into Frederica and I love it. I love it. Yeah, this one is, I'm enjoying this much more than Arabella. I did enjoy Arabella, but I felt she was very young, Arabella, and it was a very kind of light, I felt like a little bit of an on the surface kind of relationship. Yeah, I didn't really get into their chemistry, I guess. But with Frederica and the Marquis de Alverstoke, who are the romantic interests, I really loved their scenes, their connection, their banter, their wit. Both of them are slightly older, I guess, than Arabella and Beaumaris. Maybe that was the reason. I don't know, but the chemistry is really strong between Frederica and Alverstoke. Yeah, just the relationships, the characters, those aspects in general. It seems to be a bit deeper and more fleshed out in Frederica. I don't know the backstory or the chronological orders of when Haya wrote these books. I don't really know much about it. They kind of have a similar structure, but Frederica definitely seems to just be a little bit more detailed and fleshed out, and there's a bit more substance there. And yeah, I'm really, really enjoying it. There is an element in Haya's writing and the stories that frustrates me in a way that Austen's stories didn't. And I think it might be intentional. I don't know. Haya fans out there, please, engage with me in conversation about it, help me out here. But the exploration of how restricted females were depending on their class in society, their position. Yeah, and just how both stories of Arabella and Frederica, they were so reluctantly dependent on the men providing for them. I mean, this aspect obviously is in Austen's stories, but it just frustrated me in Haya's depictions. So I guess it is intentional. I don't know. Is it? I imagine it is because, Haya's life was from 1900s to 1970s. She lived in an era where maybe she felt she could make a bit more of a commentary through the way she wrote the characters and the stories in her books. I don't know. Oh, and the other thing about these two books, and it might be a coincidence, but what's up with the dogs? There's the element of the pet dog, Arabella and Mr. Beaumaris. They find this kind of stray, like mongrel dog, which definitely would not be fitting as a high society, pet dog. But Arabella somehow convinces Beaumaris to adopt this dog. And then in Frederica has a family dog named Luff. This dog is quite wild and untamed and doesn't follow the rules and gets really excited and runs away, and they're trying to tame this dog. Alverstoke ends up in a couple of circumstances of this dog where he ends up saving the dog. So I obviously it's, a bit of a parallel, bit of a symbolism of the ladies, the protagonists. Is this dog parallel thing in every Haya story? Are the lady protagonists in Haya's books, are they going to be symbolized in a canine character? Does this happen a lot? Because if so, that could get old for me and eventually a little bit offensive. But if it is intentional and is kind of making a commentary about pets and dogs and ladies and how they are quite dependent. So if it's making a commentary in that kind of cynical sense, then maybe, that's quite clever. There were a couple of those elements that kind of frustrated me, but in a good way. Overall, they are just delightful, sparkling reads and really detailed with the historical elements. I really am just transported into the Regency period, which is exactly what I want. Yeah, I think Haya might be my new comfort read because I am just glowing on the inside when I read her books. So that was the last of Regency Wormhole reads before I kind of climbed myself out Now I'm ready to move on to part 2 of my summer reading, and I think I'm going to now move on to some more fantasy reading. I am about halfway in my journey with Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. I've started the second book. Loving it. Loving it. Already my heart is breaking. Damn you, Robin Hobb. I think I'll try to finish off the Farseer journey, so I'll read the second book and then the third book. And then I think I'll move on to Jade City by Fonda Lee for the hype of it puts me off. So yeah, I had a weird but wonderful Regency Wormhole reading viewing phase, and yeah, really looking forward to moving on to a bit of fantasy. So yeah, let me know what you think, particularly about Bridgerton, and also Heya fans out there, give me some insight please. Well, thank you so much for watching. My name is Sun. This is Sun and Mood Reads. Please subscribe if you feel compelled to, and I will see you next time. Bye. Sun and Mood Reads. So that was the last of the Regency Wormhole reads before I kind of climbed myself out. And now I am ready to move on to, my summer reading. Now I'm ready to move on to part 2 of my summer reading, and I think I'm going to now move on to some more fantasy reading. More fantasy reading. I have just started. I am about halfway in my journey with Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. I've started the second book, Royal Apprentice, and loving it. Loving it. Already my heart is breaking. Damn you, Robin Hobb. And I'm really looking forward to reading Jade City by Fonda Lee. That's the one I will move on to next. And then I'll probably... Damn you, Robin Hobb. And then I think I'm going to... I think I'll try to finish off the Farseer journey, so I'll read the second book and then the third book. And then I think I will